So welcome to Ensuring Course Readings Are Accessible to Students. My name is Liz Buoda. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian, and my co-host today is Crystal Tosh. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Crystal Tosh. I am the Digital Accessibility Analyst in ITS.
And we teamed up with these to, again, try to help faculty with the looming deadline of making sure that course materials are accessible. And so on today's agenda, we're going to talk about the issue. We're going to talk about triaging and kind of different ways to make course readings accessible, including finding stable links to content and making sure those links are descriptive, and then ensuring that any documents you do upload are accessible, whether that is something that a PDF you've downloaded and are putting up there, or if it's creating your own document. And we will definitely leave you with plenty of different resources as well as time for Q&A at the end. So last May, ODE came to a library meeting and reported that there were 1.4 million issues with PDFs and over 18,000 scanned PDFs in Canvas courses. And we didn't realize quite how bad the problem was. So that was our reaction. So to help with this, because again, the deadline is 3 months away at this point, we are going to kind of, again, give you some ways to triage. So the first way to really look at this is if we have content is to find a link and link out to that content rather than uploading something. It takes them to most of the, especially like library content or things that are online, HTML versions of documents tend to work better with screen readers than PDFs just in general, especially because so many PDFs are just not geared, they're not formatted for accessibility purposes, even coming straight from publishers. So with the library's quick search, and to make this kind of easy for everybody, if you can find the content through the library's quick search, there's a permalink icon that will take our students back to a standardized looking page rather than having them go into EBSCO versus JSTOR versus Web of Science versus Scopus, right? This is one way to get them to look at this. So in quick search here, you find a list of results like this, and there's this little permalink icon on the results list. If you actually click on an entry here, you can grab a permalink here as well. Okay, and what this does, what these permalinks will do, is that they will again bring you back to a standard kind of record for the document that you're having your students look in, whether that is an article like this one where they can download a PDF if they want to right away, but they can also access the content through the database. So if they do want a screen reader capability thing, or they need that kind of extra help, they can go this way. This also works if it's a book, right? With a lot of our ebooks, there isn't directly a link to a PDF, but they are able to go into different options here. And truthfully, something like EBSCO host ebooks, they actually have a really good accessible reader that's attached to them, so that, you know, we don't necessarily have to worry about this. And they have some accessibility built into their reader. And quite a few of the databases do have some accessibility and like screen reading built into them. But EBSCO is kind of far and away doing a little bit more with this, with regard to some of the accessibility options and support that they have on their site. And this also works for film. So again, anything that you can kind of find through quick search, it looks the same. It takes them to, again, to the standard record, not a huge long results list, just one record that they're able to go in and access. So this is why we are suggesting the quick search, because again, it's a standard interface for students to get in. They don't have to worry about, you know, learning different databases. And also you don't have to do anything to this permalink except to copy and then paste it into your Canvas course as a descriptive link as you're going through here. If for whatever reason the content that you're looking for you cannot find during quick search, please again double check with us. Oftentimes we'll be able to locate it, but there are some of our databases, specifically with some of the more specialized ones, things that are archival, some of our business resources, some of our statistical sources that don't necessarily come up as easily in quick search. So if you do need to do that, most of the databases will have a persistent link that you can copy and paste again. It's often labeled as a permalink, a stable link, sometimes a document URL. Sometimes they'll see it in the citation information. If you don't see a permalink available, you can copy the web address in the browser bar, but definitely test it out to make sure that it works. DOIs will often work, but they don't necessarily lead back to the original database you found it in. Oftentimes they'll go to a particular journal page. And then finally, if you are copying links on campus, they don't necessarily have this little code attached to them, called our proxy, that would prompt students to log in to make sure that they have access to it. Oftentimes you will see them if you are working off campus, and they'll be included. And just as an example of what these can look like is here. So oftentimes when you are creating them, you'll need to plug this in at the very beginning of a link. But if you're copying it off campus, sometimes there'll be this little, string in the middle of a link. So there's a couple different ways that this will look, but these are what you would look for. Yeah, so I'll go into a couple here just to give you an idea. So for example, if we were going to go into an EBSCO database, it will look like this here up at the top, but you can see there's a little share icon here and you can create a link. And because again, since I am I'm on campus right now, the link in here does not include the proxy information. If I'm going into something like JSTOR, they have over on the kind of left side up here, there's this stable URL here as well as a DOI. Either of these will work, but again, I'm on campus, so that proxy isn't available because the databasers are basically recognizing that I'm on campus, so I should have access to everything. Okay, and this is where I would need to go in and create that. But again, I would more likely than not want you to try to go into quick search and grab that permalink so you don't have to worry about creating and building a link yourself and having to test it between different browsers. Okay. So once you have found a link to the content that you want, and this goes for not only library content, but other websites and places that you're taking students outside of Canvas, you're going to want to create a descriptive link in Canvas. A lot of the times I'm going to suggest a title of the book or a full citation, just so that they have all the information, especially if for some reason the link breaks or something else happens, that they have that information to go and find the readings and the content for themselves. So descriptive links should not actually list out the link with HTTPS:// www, like that's not good. And even something like click here, it can kind of get really annoying for if you're listening to a screen reader and like every other line is click here, click here, click here, click here, click here. It's not fun. So again, thinking about and using the descriptive links to actually describe what your students are going to be seeing. So let me grab a Canvas course here. And this top link that we're seeing here, the Stewart CC, this is a descriptive link, right? So this is a citation minus the URL at the very end, but it is a link out to this particular one. The second one here, where the DOI is a hyperlink, this is not descriptive. Okay, so we want to look something like this top one rather than the bottom. And even things like Stewart.pdf or PDF here, if there's like an actual, if it's just the file name, so if it was Stewart2020.pdf as like the extension, that's also not going to be descriptive anyway. So how you do these, and I'm sure this will not be that strange, but you basically just highlight the text you want and you go up to add in a link here. And you can even once you have the link options, if you need to change anything, you can actually change it within the text here, or if you need to change the link, you can do that as well. So pretty simple in order to get this here. For the purposes of this, again, linking is probably the fastest on your end and most efficient way to kind of get that content that you need. However, if you do end up having to put PDFs up and other types of documents, there are some basic accessibility requirements that you need to meet. UJA Panorama is the program that we've bought and kind of added on to Canvas to do these initial accessibility checks for us. And there's some major issues that come back within UJA that need to kind of be taken care of. The first being tagged content, and this is basically some kind of code and metadata on the document that ensures that there's kind of a logical reading order for a screen reader to kind of go through and make sure that it is reading content correctly. Optical character recognition is another thing that needs to happen. So a lot of PDFs are, when you just scan them in, it's actually an image. So the computer doesn't know what is text, what is picture, until you kind of run this program. And it basically makes sure that text is readable by computer programs itself. Making sure that any images and graphs are described with alternative text to, again, make sure that they're being read and being understood by people who need to have that adaptive technology. And then color contrast is another one that we see, and that's basically making sure that the contrast between like the text and the background is enough so that people who are colorblind or who have other visual disabilities are going to be able to read that without any issue. Okay. So programs to use, especially if you already have content uploaded into Canvas, UJA Panorama at least gives you kind of a clue as to what's going on. But Adobe Acrobat is going to be the main program that you have access to through the Adobe Creative Cloud. The University of Michigan has, accounts available for all students, faculty, and staff that they can download and use this. And it's going to be the major tool that would actually allow you to fix everything to the best of your ability, or at least get it close to as accessible as possible. So again, if you have stuff in Canvas already, going through and using Panorama to identify them and then possibly fix things. Crystal and I just learned that a couple of days ago that there was some more functionality with Panorama when we first signed on, but we've kind of like moved out of we basically hit the limit on the number of PDFs it was allowed to remediate without asking for a bunch more money. So we've switched over, and UJA will kind of tell you have to go into Adobe Acrobat to fix this now. And I will say that, you will not be able to fix every single issue unless you spend a lot of time going into this. So again, focusing on the major issues to kind of get through and make them accessible is a good idea, or is the best place to start. So we're going to go back into Canvas course here, and you'll see all of these different little icons here to say we have a Panorama score of 0% here, and then I have a remediated copy of this same one that has a 100% score on it. So once you click on the little alternative option here, it'll say that there's an accessibility report. I actually already ran it. If there isn't, it will actually ask you to run it again, and you can see and view what is an issue here. So for example, I need to check the reading order, which basically is asking me to look through the tags and look through the kind of structure of the paper behind the scenes in the metadata to make sure that everything would be read in order rather than kind of jumping around between different paragraphs or different graphs and this kind of stuff. You'll notice that there are going to be some disabled issues or like disabled kind of warnings here because, again, months ago, before they decided to change this, font that is smaller than 9 points is not accessible, right? It's harder to read for a lot of people. And so we were getting dinged with this. So I think the first time I ran the report on this document, there was like, I don't know, 200 to 300 different issues that it raised because of that 9-point font. So we've reset UJA because, again, a lot of PDFs you can use a zoom in, zoom out feature. So the actual point, the font size is not as big of an issue. But you can go through and you can see both minor and major. So if I want to click on the major issues, it will kind of note that I do not have some alternative text for some of these graphs. And it will highlight the area that it's showing, and you'll say, that's not the full graph, Liz. And that's why I said yes, because computers don't have eyes and they can't actually see and they don't understand that this is just a portion of the graph. So this is definitely something that I would want to go into Adobe and try to actually get this whole thing listed as a figure rather than just this like small section of the graph. And again, if I go through and say, oh, that's one image and this is a new image and then this is a new image, right? Like you could actually go into Adobe and make this all one image or one figure to fix this. And again, with all the minor ones, these are probably all going to be related to reading order. And I could just say check the issue, but basically I can verify the reading. I can click verify reading order without even having to go in there. And like, that's not good, right? We want to actually go in and make sure that these things are fine. Okay. So sometimes you will also see things like this one here where it hasn't really run the accessibility report and I can view it, or it will basically just say that there's only one major issue and that it's untagged. And you can try to learn more on this thing and it will talk about how to try to tag it a little bit, but it doesn't go into really great depth besides, asking you to auto tag it in Adobe Acrobat here. There's not as much support and kind of tutorials from UJA as I'd like. But they are at least kind of pointing you in the direction of where you would need to go into Adobe to fix this. Okay. So speaking of Adobe, let's take a look here. All right. So again, this is a article that I downloaded from the library site. And once I'm in here, I will need to go over to my left-hand menu, and there's a couple of different pages that you're going to want to, or a couple of different tools that you're going to want to pay attention to. Probably the biggest one is going to be prepare for accessibility. This is where you can actually check for accessibility, and really similarly to UJA, Adobe will actually go through and give you a list of things that need to happen. So for example, there are tags on this, but there's no title that's associated with this. There's some issues with the tags and the character encoding on this. And there's also some figures that do not have alternative text. And there's even something that's going on with the nesting of headers. Okay. So this is a good one to look at. This is where you can actually automatically tag the PDF. This is where you can look at fixing the reading order, adding alternative text, all of this here. Before we get too much in the weeds with Adobe Acrobat, like most Adobe products, it has a very steep learning curve. And it is the support and help that is on the Adobe site is written for, in my opinion, people with a lot of expertise. It is a little bit hard to parse through, especially for beginners. Okay. So if you have, several months to kind of learn Adobe Acrobat and understand everything that's going on, great, awesome. But I know a lot of our faculty do not have that time. So again, this is something to kind of use as like an absolute, like when you have to, for if you know you have students who have what is the word? Oh my gosh. Accommodations, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. If you know you have students who have accommodations or who have, specifically disclosed disabilities to you that they do need a screen reader and stuff. So maybe prioritize classes with those students in them to make sure that all this is good. But so this is the prepare for accessibility issue, and you can kind of see through here and you can go in and actually look at what the reading order looks like and also like what the tags are and everything from this side too. And you'll notice that there's a heading 2 and then a heading 3. And so I could change this to a heading 1 really quickly. But again, it's definitely anybody who's worked with like a markup language like HTML or anything else like this, it looks really similar to some of the coding that you would look in there. Okay. So this prepare for accessibility. Other things you might need to use are going to be edit a PDF. And in this case, this is going to especially, actually, hold on a second. For if you've scanned something, you might have to go in. So I scanned a chapter from this book, right? And these are just images here, but I can go in and edit a PDF, use the edit process here to actually do things like crop out all this extra space here, and then go through and actually make sure and try to, straighten out some of these pages and everything else that's going on in here too. If I wanted to go in and crop this page, I could do that. And then again, it takes out all that extra area. So again, you're kind of focusing and making sure that this content is what you want it to look like. And you'd go through that, page by page to fix it. The other issue or other tool that you're probably going to want to use quite a bit is going to be the scan and OCR. And again, OCR is optical character recognition. And this is going to ensure that the words are actually going to be read as words, because if not, so this, let me show you, the screen reader basically will read gibberish. So this is a section I highlighted from that book I scanned, and without optical character recognition, this is what it would try to give me. So numerous studies on children's, of which only a few dealing specifically, right? It doesn't go well, because again, it's the before optical character recognition, it is making its best guess as to what this particular squiggly set of pixels on a page is. So it doesn't always do the best job. And you can kind of tell like what it is by just copying and pasting. So once it's fixed, it should come back in. I will say that when you do recognize text, I would try to do go over here to the little thing and do make it an editable text and image, so it's not just kind of overlaying text on top of it. And you would just run through this and hit recognize text, and it will show you if there's any symbols or words that it didn't recognize, and you can go through and try to fix it as well. But again, Adobe is it takes a little bit of doing to try to kind of really get good at this, and I'm still figuring things out as I go along. One of the reasons that you really might want to make sure that any uploaded content is accessible instead of going out and linking out to things is using Panorama's alternative formats. All right. So this is on the student side. When you upload a Word document or a PDF or something else like this, Panorama will try to give options for different options on how students can access the content. And again, you have to have a PDF that has been tagged and has OCR attached to it too. But basically what this looks like, we're going to skip over to view as a student here. And the students won't necessarily see the scores. They just see this little blue guy in here. And if you click on him, it'll give you a couple of different options on how to see this, right? So you can do an immersive reader, which I kind of like because it will actually go through and read and kind of highlight things as you go along. And again, depending on how you have this, so it's going to start with a page number versus the DOI versus like all this stuff, rather than kind of skipping on down to the title of the article. Okay. And it actually does read aloud and kind of work out this way. And you do have the ability to up the voice speed. You have a couple of different voice selections that you can use as well. You can also do things like text preferences, give you different fonts that you look at. So again, if someone who's dyslexic may prefer a different font to help them read, you can also change like the themes and like look at it in a couple of different ways, which is nice. I also really like the gradient reader. So again, for people who are dyslexic or who have ADHD or some other kind of some of those more cognitive disabilities, helping people scan through and just making slight changes to the text really does help them scan through and read the documents a little bit better. So again, another option here. And then there's even things like you can generate an audio podcast, or if someone is, a Braille reader, they can request that as well through here. Even do some language translations. I have not been able to vouch for those myself, but there's options here for them to access these. And then finally, so not only should you be thinking about the accessibility of documents that you are linking out to or that you are uploading that are created by others, you should start thinking about incorporating accessibility into the documents that you are creating, whether that is your syllabus, whether that is slides from Google, whether that is, other assignments and things that are being put out there. So when you're creating stuff, Microsoft has some embedded accessibility checkers within Word and I believe PowerPoint as well. Then there are some Grackle extensions for Google products that are going to check for accessibility during creation. You need to actually go and download those and add them on as an extension to your browser in order for them to work. The other thing is if you are going to not upload, a Microsoft Word document that's editable for students, but you want to have a PDF that is less editable for them, you're going to download that Microsoft Word or save as a PDF to keep all the accessibility that you're putting into those documents. Because if you print to PDF, it just creates an image and erases all the lovely tags and accessibility that you just did, okay? So just giving you an example of what Grackle does on this particular slide page is I've already got it installed under extensions here, and I go under extensions, Grackle slides, and launch, and it will run an accessibility check for a couple of major things, and it will tell you again, give you kind of like, where is this in the document that needs to help with it. So far I've got 15 out of 16 checks passed, so yay. You'll talk about like presentation title is required, that the document language should be specified, that titles on slides should be unique. You shouldn't have empty slides. Tables, if you have anything, should be kind of tagged, which I don't. Oh, but I do have an image that needs some help. So I have one image that has alternative text, but for some reason I missed one here. And so I can click on it and it will take me to the image that needs alternative text. So I could click on the image and I could go up for format options, and then in alternative text option here, I could put in the alternative text that I would need to describe what is going on in this image. So I would say, shocked woman pulling glasses off her face or something like this. Again, this is a decorative image, so I don't have to be incredibly specific with it. I just kind of need to give the vibes of the image and like why it's important on, the slide that's reporting how much of an issue we had in Canvas. For more advanced and more complex images, specifically things like scientific diagrams, graphs, all of that kind of stuff, you do actually need to include more alternative text. And we have some links out to a couple of different sources that really go more in depth into how to kind of describe those things. Because again, a lot of what we see in faculty content and faculty slides is that bigger content. You'll also notice that there are some large within Grackle, there are some things that like hit. So the alternative text not being there is a big one, but you will also see some like fine print should be avoided, inline style changes. So for example, I think I've got something either highlighted or bolded and it doesn't like the fact that I have it bolded, because to a person who's using a screen reader, it doesn't make any difference to them. But for my sake, for people who are readers and are able to view this and not use the screen reader, I would leave it in just to kind of do this. So there are going to be kind of minor and major issues. And for example, there's a trailing line somewhere in here. It doesn't like extra spaces in between, but again, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I think that there's one space in between my name and Crystal's name. It's okay. Screen reader will be able to handle it. So again, like if I was going to share these out with a student, I would go up to File and I would download as a PDF document in this way. And again, Microsoft Office products, similarly, it's just there's an actual like tab on the pages it's on the review tab typically in Microsoft Word. So takeaways and triage. Create descriptive links to online readings whenever possible. Saves you time. Again, a lot of the accessibility that's out there through just digital screen readers is embedded within web browsers that our students are using. So this is, again, a good first step to get your content to, or your classes to a high score within UGen or within Panorama. And again, I think we're trying to get to like 91% accessible overall. So the more that we can do to get up to that level is great. Triage making documents accessible. So again, if you know you have students who have those accommodations, if there's no other way to get this content into your classes outside of uploading those documents, focus on major issues like OCR, alternative text, tag content, and color contrast. Those are the big kind of major issues that Panorama will flag. Uploading those accessible documents will let your students use those alternative formats, which are very nice, especially for students with learning disabilities and just, attention or other cognitive disabilities. And then starting to create your own documents with accessibility in mind at all times. And again, using a lot of the tools that are embedded within Google Docs and within Microsoft Word to create headings and make lists and make tables and stuff and that are accessible that way. So some of the tools that we have, Crystal has been hard at work creating the accessibility tools at U of M Flint page. There's a lot of great content on there. ODE has a Panorama knowledge base article that goes in depth and detail and stuff. I will always plug DAS's accessible materials and TCLT's inclusive teaching tools kit that talks about accessibility a little bit, but also other issues that might be happening. UJA and Panorama both have accessibility help centers. Again, Adobe's is a little dense to try to get through, but it does help. And I definitely have been looking at this YouTuber, the accessibility guy, quite a bit. He does like short little videos about how to work with particular aspects of Adobe Acrobat, or is talking about like what heading structure is, or like color contrast checkers and stuff. So he's a little streamery, but the content is actually good. You just kind of have to get over all the extra flashing lights, and not flashing lights, but like colored lights and stuff around him. So we've got time for questions.
Thank you for watching this recorded webinar. Find upcoming webinars to register for at libcal.umflint.edu.